Welcome to another episode of Michael Mahoney Artist Perspectives. This is me walking down a snowy bank to find a scene to paint in wintry Colorado on the Taylor's Fork of the Gunnison River. The late afternoon sun drew me out on this 5-degree Fahrenheit day to try and find something real pretty to paint. Probably be doing a watercolor once I find something to look at. And right when I got down to the river, I looked up and saw this in the frame of my camera. It's a perfect little scene. Triangle of the blue coming down to match the triangle of the river going up. The trees on the far side create an interesting combination with the trees on the right side. It's a great scene. Some good things happening in the water. There's actually some cascades that wouldn't be there because there's ice on the bottom of the river, which creates a little bit more of a blue-green effect. I like this time of year. The rivers get real blue-green because there's actually ice in the water. You can kind of see there's been a little fox or something running along there, so this is a great spot. I'm waving. My shadow's going to leave because in place of my shadow comes my painting. I'm going to show you the drawing here. I didn't want to bore you with me sketching little sketches of how I started out, but as you can see, I pretty well caught that frame. I condensed it a little bit narrower to fit the paper, and then I'll get going here. I'm going to bring the brush out here. You can see the brush coming on, but before I paint, I'm going to pan around one more time to kind of give you an idea of where we're at here. This is the Taylor's Fork of the Gunnison River Canyon, as they call it, for obvious reasons. Volcanic, rocky, craggy cliffs, big Doug fir trees, actually quite a wide variety of evergreen trees in this valley. Up on the hills there's ponderosa and juniper. Now I'll get going. I didn't want to bore you with showing you how I blocked in that blue on the front, just a lot of water and then filling in that blue. Now I'll paint a little bit on this river while we're kind of give you a feel for what's going on. I started in just pretty much at this point. I'm filling in the lines that I've drawn. Watercolor painting, if you're doing realistic watercolor painting, and if you look at any of the great masters, your drawing is very important to be pretty good, to feel real comfortable with your drawing at the beginning, because you can't really correct things like you can come back in on oil paint or acrylic and block out something and change it, but you want to be pretty comfortable with your drawing when you start in with a watercolor, because once the paint's down you can move it around, but you can't make design changes. So on the river I'm going with something that's similar to the sky, and then I think I'm using a phthalo blue because that's a good blue-green, a greeny sky. I'm using that because you get the reflection on the water from the sky. And then what I'll do to kind of bring up the bottom of the river is I'll come in with yellow, here I am right now, right over the top of that blue, and I'll let it mix right on the paper. I really like that when I'm doing water. Let it drip a little bit and run and have its own way, because then it looks it looks just like it happened. And you want that quality with water. You want it to look like you didn't make it happen. It happened by itself, and that is something water always likes to do. It doesn't like to be contained. So the painter should always remember that. I'll throw in a little bit, I'm cleaning my brush right now and making sure my yellow is good. And now I'm going to clean it out and get a nice job like yellow here. And then I'm going to leave all this kind of riffly water, just choppy squares. Leave it that way. Now I'm softening up the top so that I'm just mostly with just water. I'm dragging the paint that's there, softening that top edge so it looks like it's cascading down over. It's actually ice that's under there, and ordinarily it would just be rocks that it would be cascading over. Softening, softening, but you got to be careful because you want to leave your white. You're not going to be able to go back in with white, which frustrates a lot of people about watercolor. But if you take your time, I've got some ultramarine blue. I'm putting in some shadows on those rocks out there, and then I'll run the shadow along that bank. And I'll put in some tree shadows that cascade out into the river from the sun there, that late afternoon sun I was talking about. And then I'll come in on this foreground and create some shadows, the snow that's on that rock. And you kind of have to cheat here. I'm just making it look good because we have this impression of how things look, and a lot of times every painter is an impressionist of some kind, and everybody's got an impression of something, and so you have to play with that a little bit. I just drew some lines there to make it look like something's happening there. I'll go back and forth. You can see now I've got my design. I've got that big triangle of blue coming down, and then a matching triangle kind of coming up with the flow of the water going back up. I'm softening up that those edges a little bit more, and then I'm going to jump ahead so I don't bore you to tears. I'm going to jump ahead, and I'm going to show you what happens. I'm going to go ahead and put some of those tree lines in. I'm just basically following the lines, and you'll see as the painting jumps up right now. You see I put those trees in on that line. It's just basically going in with some kind of gray that I've created with some dirty ultramarine blue. And now I'm going to redo the sky. Now a lot of watercolor painters don't like doing this. In my studies of a lot of Sargent's paintings, John Singer Sargent, and my real hero is Winslow Homer. He did this a lot, I think. You just can't get a strong enough color a lot of times. There's an old saying in watercolor, if it's too bright, it's just right. Because when it dries, it soaks into the paper, your pigment soaks into the paper, and it becomes real flat and dull again. And so, in a lot of cases, especially with this Colorado winter sky that is basically an unbelievable blue, I'm going to go back over it and do what I just did there. And, this is just water I have in my brush, softening up those edges, trying to create areas where the branches are softening up the edge of that blue sky in a way that's just makes it look more natural. Once again, being an impressionist, not looking at every little detail there. Now, that was kind of odd, wasn't it? Well, that's some yellow ochre, and then I get a clean brush with water on it, and I'll just push that around, and that blue and that yellow ochre will kind of give that golden feeling that the branches of the tree has up there, and create kind of a gray that will fill in where I've taken away from that blue. Just kind of work things in as I go. You're always creating edges and then softening the edges back up. I'm gonna, as you can see, I've done that rock in the foreground behind my hand, and I did that already, and this is basically what I did down there. I start out with a burnt sienna, reddish brown, because the rock has that glowing through it. And then I'll go back over the top of that with an ultramarine blue, the purpley blue. Burnt sienna and ultramarine blue make a great gray, a really nice gray. And if you mix it right on the paper like I'm doing here now, some of that sienna comes back through as the blue washes around. You can't overwork it too much. That is what frustrates people about watercolor quite a bit. I'm going back in with some, just kind of a mixture of that ultramarine blue gray, toning that down, just hitting things. Get a little bit, you have to be a little bit attention deficit to paint watercolors. Now I'm decided to come right in over here and create these lines where the hills come down into the river. Obviously not really paying close attention to what it is. There's a little edge right where my brush is now that got left when I did the sky there, and it looked real natural, so I'm not going to dink around with that very much. And then I'll come back up in there with some of the green tones that those junipers and hillside cedar trees are up there, just sort of suggesting them with real light colors. You can always make things darker with watercolor. Sometimes you can't really lighten it up too much. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm blocking in some of the detail. And I'll come back later and finish this up, but I'm just going to give some hints here. I'm moving around the painting so I don't overwork one place and then have to catch up somewhere else. I'm not finished with those rocks that I started yet, but I don't want to get real contrasting values going to where I lose track of how the whole painting is feeling. So I keep working around a little bit. I'm going to soften up some edges here, and then I'll come back in and probably put some more detail in here. I'm going to soften up that little white spot where those two color areas didn't come together. As you can see, I think I'm going to brighten this brush up, and you can see that brush right behind my painting right there, and it's really nondescript, but it's a strong element of the design. So I'm really going to try and make it light, and I'll just dab it there, a piece of old shirt. A lot of people like to use a paper towel, but I just rip my old shirts up and use them. Here I am again, kind of breaking up, just moving around, doing a few things with some clear water in my brush. Here I'm hitting that blue sky again to create a little more contrast there where the bushiness of those trees are. Just clear water to break that paint back up and lift it off a little bit. And then I might even dab that with the old shirt a little bit every once in a while. And I'm going back, softening up, like I said, on those rocks. And we're going to break the edges up a little bit on those so they're not so red up there. It's a little overpowering. And I'm going to bring some of this red. I use a color called Brown Madder. It's my favorite Winsor Newton color. It's got a nice earthy tone to it, but you could use alizarin crimson for something like this. These are there's dogwood brush along this river, which is different than the trees. It's a brush. It's got a real purpley tone to it. Willows in the winter also have a purple tone, but not quite as much as the dogwoods that are along this river here. It's real striking to look at. I'll do some more paintings up the river, some different angles and some different things, and you'll see this better. Now I'm going to go in and paint the dark backgrounds, and I'm going to leave those light tree trunks as much as I can, just leave some streaks of light that'll approximate those cottonwood tree trunks and sort of blur that in. And you see I'm going to have to come back in and do those evergreens again because now they're fading down into the thing. But I've kind of got them blocked into where I want them. I want to leave this light over here because the sun is hitting that side, and I want to keep that impression going. Now I've gone to the smaller brush. It's the first time I've gone to smaller brush. It's the same. It's a round with a point, and that other brush I was using is a big round, which is real popular for watercolor. It holds a lot of water or paint, and yet you can get a pretty fine line with it. I'm going down to just a little bit finer line so I can get some little brushy, sticky feeling things going on. I think I want to leave this tree broken up because of the way the light's hitting it. I want it to look light and dark. There's a shadow, but something's hitting it. There's some more of this work. And as I paint here, I lose the paint out of the brush. And then with that almost dry brush, I can kind of smush it around the wet areas and make it look real brushy. As Bob Ross would say, real happy little brush there. I respect him for doing what he did for so long. Here I am with that red a little bit again, pumping that up just a bit, giving a little detail, dragging it down the bank a little, drawing it up into there. Mostly a dry brush, just dragging the colors together, and come back in and detail again. A lot of painting is detailing and then breaking the detail depth back down. And this is getting pretty close to the finished product. I'm just blending these bottoms up. There was kind of a line there. I'm blending the bottom darks up into those areas. I like to leave a little bit bright edge right next to that one cottonwood tree. I'm just going to leave that because that looks so natural. I'm coming to where I'm probably going to lighten up the tops of those cottonwood trees just a little bit again with some more water after I create a few more edges up here. I think I need to create some more action going on up here. So I'm going to put some detail in. Like I said, take some more detail out. Just sort of natural looking, but where I've designated it to be. And now here's that big brush with some water, mostly just water, and then of course it picks up a little tone, and you can be aware of that. Just breaking up a little bit what I did, leaving suggestions of what I just did there. Now I'm going to come back in. I zoomed in on this so you can see some texture and some color. I'm going to recharge these evergreens back here to sort of bring that back up, give it some definition. I'm going to break that plane so that horizon line doesn't go clear, just straight off the page there. It will kind of circulate the design around a little bit. And then, of course, with the almost just watery brush, I'm going to hit those edges, soften it all so it's not hard, because those tree tops are so soft. Now I'm starting to feel like that's a little bit too soft for, it's getting a little too much attention over there. So I'm going to soften it up just a little bit, and I'm just about to be close to being done. Now, no painting is done until this, of course. A long, skinny brush with a lot of paint in it, so I don't have to stop. I may have done this a few times. Flash the brush at you, and I'll show you that final painting. I'll get some close-ups. There's the tape, and I tape it to a board, a masonite board that I've got some paint on. It's basically really ugly. Really, here you can see the blending of the paint right on the surface. Detailed, that's been then hit back with a little water, broken the edges, create an edge and break an edge. There's that little edge on the far horizon that I told you that happened when I was doing the sky that I liked. It looks so natural, so I just left that alone. And brush the bush. It's nondescript, but it creates an element. You kind of get a feeling for what it is. I was really happy with my cascading water on this particular one. You can get really concerned about detail, and of course the all-important signature. Pretty successful little painting in a really pretty place. Taylor River in Colorado, near Crested Butte. Gunnison and Crested Butte. And here I am walking up the hill. I'm going to look my age here for a minute. I put my foot up, there's a big rock there, and I didn't want to fall for the camera, so I better get a different foothold. Here we go. Oh, and I didn't have gloves on, and most of those bushes there are rose bushes, so I didn't want to grab out and hold a rose bush. Alright, thanks for watching. That was a fun watercolor painting.